Hi, I'm Leslie, and I am a life coach based here in Brisbane, Australia. I'm originally from the US, Pennsylvania, and in this video, I am joined by my lovely friend Asabi Goodman, who is also an African American woman from Oklahoma, living here in Australia. We had a really nice chat about why we moved here, what our expectations were, and some of the interesting differences between living in the United States and living here in Australia. We did have a few audio-visual issues, but we still managed to share our insights about being outsiders in a country with a surprisingly different culture to that of the US. So check it out. All right. Asabi Goodman,
Hi,
how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, I had a decent workout at the gym. I rode my bike to work today, and I'm still alive.
Yay! I ran
Yeah.
upstairs and I am not sore. So I'm
Oh, from
feeling
running up the stairs.
up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, over and over. Because it's good cardio. It's really
Yeah.
good.
Does your cat watch you run up and down the stairs?
She does. And she looks at me with this perplexed look like, what are you doing? You're leaving. Now you're not leaving. Why are you coming up and down? And then she'll run down the stairs and then she's like, why are you coming up? What are you doing? So yeah, she gets really confused. But
Your cat probably has the most twisted impression of what reality is.
She probably does. And she loves to sit on my shoulder, especially after I fed her and she's like wanting to give me love or giving her food. So she just like kind of runs in and runs up me and just perches on the shoulder and then like paws forward and goes to sleep.
What a cutie.
Very cute.
Very cute.
Yeah.
Speaking of cuties, tell us about yourself.
Oh, well, the original herself. No, so I am 45 and I don't mind sharing my age. I love to say that I'm 45. I'm from America, originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma, although I was born in Akron, Ohio. I have a degree in chemical engineering. So I worked as a chemical engineer for about 20 years, and I did that in America and in Australia. And in 2019, I retired from chemical engineering to become a full-time freelance performer. So I'm an actor and singer. That's me in a nutshell. And I love cats. I guess that's the most about me is that I love cats.
Yeah, that's the most important thing about anyone is like how they feel about various types of animals. Right? I know lots of cool stuff about flamingos.
They're very pretty. They're pink.
Did you know they make milk?
What?
Flamingos make milk, and it's red.
Ew. Oh.
It looks like blood.
Ew.
Okay.
I mean, okay. I did not know that.
Okay. Anyway, enough about flamingos. Yeah. So, when did you move to Australia?
I moved to Australia. Okay, get this. January 6th, 2008. I remember the day. It was a Sunday when I landed, Sunday morning. And I moved to Australia to work for an engineering company. And, you know, Australia was going through its drought at the time. And I was a water process engineer. So I used to do water treatment designs and water management designs and that sort of thing. So I went to Australia to work on water management projects for municipalities. And the first thing that happens, I get here and it freaking rains. And I'm not talking like a little tiny bit of rain. It was like a deluge of rain. And I was just like, what? I thought we were in drought. What's going on? And there was a massive rainstorm hitting. It rained all afternoon. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, do I still have a job?
It's like, am I being punked? What is this?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, is this the right country? Like, have I landed in the right place? But so that's when I came here. So it's been 13, almost 13 and a half years that I'm here now.
Yeah. It's funny. I arrived in April of 2009, and I first was living in Melbourne.
And you still say it like an American. Melbourne. No, you don't. Well,
No, like
you do. I mean, I say Melbourne.
I don't say Melbourne.
No, that's true. And
So,
is that like at first, that's how I used to say it, Melbourne. People are like, what? I'm like, that's how it's spelled. Hello. But I actually say it Melbourne, like Melbin, Melbourne.
I kind of waver between the two. Like, it depends on what I'm talking about, I think.
Yeah, and maybe who you're talking to.
Sometimes. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. All that code switching you have to do here in Brisbane.
Right? I do, like, people do tell me that sometimes I say things with an Australian accent, and I'm like, no, I don't. But then if I stop and listen, like, people will actually stop me. Oh my God, that was Aussie right there. And I'm like, was it? Anyway, sorry, I completely interrupted you.
That's okay. Yeah, I originally came here, I was working in Vietnam before I moved here. And I came to visit a guy I had met when I was traveling in Cambodia. And when I agreed to the visit, it kind of made more sense at the time financially to just move to Melbourne for a year and then go somewhere else, either go back to Vietnam or go to some other country. That relationship fell apart pretty early on, but we stuck with it for about 3.5 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's a long time for it fell apart early on, but hey.
Yeah, there was a degree of emotional abuse in that relationship. And in fact, when I applied for permanent residency, a lot of that was as a result of being bullied into it.
Wow.
I know, it's so weird to think about it too, because I'm really, really glad that I am now an Australian citizen. Like, I applied for permanent residency. He was my sponsor, which added to the tension.
Got a hold on you, sort of.
Yeah. And I thought that things might be better between us after my permanent residency came through, but then it wasn't. It wasn't.
Yeah, well, that's because after, like, once you get your permanent residency, you also have a greater degree of freedom, because then they know that you no longer need them to stay here. It's the same with companies. So this is just my experience. I don't know if every company is like that, and it could just be the people that I worked with in the company, but there were a couple of individuals who happened to be my bosses, unfortunately, who would say things like, we might think that you just may not be the right fit for the company, knowing that I was still under a work visa, and that if they canceled my visa, I had 30 days to either find a new employer or I had to leave. And 30 days is not a lot of time, And so they would sort of dangle that, like, that's sort of how they would, if I got out of line to them, which was like, if I stood up for myself, or if I was like taking notes when my boss was like, why are you writing this down? I'm like, so that I would be able to know what you're saying. He was that sort of dickhead. So then they say things like, oh, we might need to rethink whether you're the right fit for the company, smack you back in line. And once I got my permanent residency, I just kind of went in and I was like, this shit stops now. If you want to fire me, fucking fire me. I don't care. I can go someplace else and I can take as long as I want to do it. Oh, no. That's not what no. So there you go. You have the upper hand once you have your permanent residency.
Yeah.
I mean, the only people who kick you out is the government.
Yeah. And I definitely want to get back to that in a bit. But so when you knew that you were going to arrive here, what did you expect?
I don't know. And first, let me say that my plan was to only stay for 2 years. That was it. I was not, like, I told the company, yeah, I'm immigrating, but that was just to get them to pay for it. I hope they never find that out and want that money back. And I wasn't really expecting anything. I was just expecting to move into a country, get my international experience, go back to America, climb the management side of the engineering ladder, because now I had international experience. I could say, I've worked overseas, blah, blah, blah. That was what you needed to do in order to move up in America, or it would give you a leg up.
Yeah.
And so I literally and I've lived overseas before. So when I was young, I worked and studied in Japan. And so I wasn't really expecting anything. Like I was expecting it to be different because it is a different country. I knew that, obviously English is the main language, but I didn't expect to struggle with it as much as I did. I was not familiar with the Australian accent. And for some reason, I just assumed that they all sounded British because, former British colony. So that was an expectation that I had. And I couldn't tell the difference between an Australian accent, a British accent, and a New Zealand accent when I first came here. Like they all
right. Okay.
So I was like, I had no idea. I expected the television to be completely different. So I had been to the UK, and the UK has its own television and film industry where there's tons of British television shows, tons of British film. So I was expecting that sort of thing. I wasn't expecting for it to be just, a bunch of carbon copy American shows thrown onto TV. That was a huge, because that's one of the ways that you learn about a country is by watching its television to see its culture, aside from just going out and meeting the people.
Yeah.
So I was really taken aback by that, that it was just American television over here. There are a few Australian shows, but they're just, I don't know. I feel that there's no humor in Australian television. They love drama. It's very dramatic. They don't have a situation comedy. They don't do that. The British do that.
They kind of do though. Now.
Not really. It's not the same. It's okay. Not like British format or American.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess if you're comparing it to like the vastness of the industry in the UK or definitely not like the US, but
no. They have I kind of liken their comedy to black comedy, sort of like where it's, although I do need to watch a bit more NITV. I find NITV, which is the Indigenous channel, kind of like our BET, I find those programs to be a bit more interesting to me. And it's only me, like I'm not trying to put down Australian television, but there is a lack of diversity in Australian television that to me makes it very uninteresting. And we do have these campaigns, we want to tell Australian stories, and it's like, well, how many times do you want to talk about some bush ranger out in the bush, like
or someone ran out of Vegemite, or someone found a kangaroo in their backyard?
Australia is a very diverse country. It what do they say? Like 25% of all of the people in all of the major cities are foreign born, so there's tons of diversity out there that we never see on Australian screens, unless it's like ABC News talking about some story. And a lot of that's crap as well. I shouldn't be saying that because I am a huge lover of ABC and the I do love, but I do think that there needs to be improvement. So I was expecting more culture, I guess, more Australian culture. It's out there. I was expecting there to be a greater tie to the Indigenous culture, and there's like hardly any. It's improving. I didn't realize that the relationship between white and Indigenous Australian was still so strained, because to me, that sort of, like, we still have our issues in the US, but when I was growing up, I never worried about where I walked. I never worried about walking into a restaurant. I never worried about, like, I grew up on the quote unquote white side of town. I never thought about that. I never worried about, someone coming and burning my family out of their home. You know what I mean? Like that just never occurred to me. I never feared the police. I never, I didn't grow up with these things. I didn't have that sort of thing. So, people say, oh, America hasn't improved. And I disagree. I think it has improved. Do we still have a ways to go? Yes. And I just wasn't expecting that in Australia. For some reason, I was assuming that Australia was a little more forward in its thing. I was assuming that it was, yeah, I was assuming that it was more forward. And I did have a couple of friends who had grown up here. They were Americans living here as teenagers, you know, and one of them did say to me, be prepared to go back 20 years when you get there. And I was like, what do you mean? And then I got here and it's like, you don't even have broadband internet. Like, what?
My gosh, the internet speeds. When I first moved here, I was like, what even is this? And the whole like idea of metered internet,
Yes.
I was like, I have never encountered this before.
They were asking me like, how much do you want? And I was like, what do you mean, how much do I want? And they were like, well, how much internet do you want? I was like, all of it? I don't understand what that means. You know, these packages, like how many gigs a month? I was like, I don't know. It's because like, everything, like I don't ever remember. And I remember when internet first was being offered in the US, and I don't ever remember them putting a cap on the amount of usage that you could have. I don't.
It's like that. Yeah, maybe back in like the early days of America Online, like that. I felt like I was kind of going back to those days.
Yeah, well,
but even then, eventually that all went unlimited.
Yeah, everything. Like by the time I left in 2008, it was unlimited. We had Netflix, but you know, that was, they would send you DVDs each
month. Yeah, I remember that.
So it was so I was prepared for things to be different, but the type of differences that I was looking forward to were not what I saw in terms, like I said, like with television and culture and that sort of thing. So that was a bit of a shock to me. I guess the other thing that I found shocking was that people made the assumption that, oh, you're from America, it's just like Australia. So no one would really help me, or no one gave me any sort of guidance on how to live here, because they made this assumption that it's exactly the same. And it's not the same. Like the idioms that they use here, the language is different. The way they talk here is different, you know, and how they categorize things, how they name things. It is different. And I was prepared for that, but I was also prepared for someone to sort of help me. So I came here not knowing anyone aside from one person who doesn't talk to me anymore. And I think he kind of like, I think he just felt like, oh, you've made friends, you're okay, I don't need to talk to you anymore. I was like, what? But like, he took me out to lunch once just to check up on me. And then that was it. I never heard from him again. I was like, okay, this is weird. Yay, friendship. So there was a bit of that. And I know within my company, there were a number of foreign expats from different countries who also complained about that. They're basically just brought in and expected to know how to live here and how to understand how things work here. And so I did complain to our HR department, and they put together a committee to put together a welcome package for people. And whenever I had new people coming into my particular work group, I would take them out and just, you know, let them ask questions, you know, say, hey, I've been through this before. I know it might seem overwhelming because you are moving to a different country. You know, I don't care what anybody says. Even if I'd moved to the UK, I would know that there are going to be some stark differences, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
So I would help people out. I mean, this is something that we used to do even in America with the last company I worked for. If we had somebody new to the city, you know, we'd have someone there to help them out and to show them around and to explain to them how things work within that city itself and where things are and how you buy things and
how you use public transport.
Yeah, you know, and just who do you call when shit goes awry, you know, if you're by yourself, or, you know, give you recommendations for dentists and for doctors and, you know, this sort of thing. Like that just doesn't happen here. And it's a level of hospitality that I think is truly lacking. There are groups now, like we've got the Americans in Australia and Americans in Brisbane, Bars and Gripes, which is my favorite, you know, so there are groups that are there for expats, American expats specifically, but I'm assuming that
African Americans in Australia.
Australia, yes, I love that group as well.
Yeah, it's a great group.
I would love to have like an African Americans in Brisbane because I know like 5. I think it'd be great if we all had a group and just, could like hang out and chat.
Well, let's do it. Like, yeah, I know a few as well, and like, just let's have a cookout.
Yeah,
let's do it.
Yeah, when we get together, and it's so comforting. Like I didn't have a lot
Putting on my to-do list
in America, but I had a few, and I mean, like I essentially grew up in a very white environment. I went to very white schools, lived in a very white neighborhood. I got teased for sounding very white, which I didn't even understand the first time I heard it. I was like, what? And then on the flip side, like I used to get teased for being black as well. Like kids would be like, oh my God, we can't touch you because if we touch you, we'll turn black, and stupid shit like that. Or like I had one girl tell me, oh, you can't come to my birthday because my parents don't like black people, Yeah. And so like I grew up in that sort of mixed environment. And coming here, I miss black people. Like I didn't have a lot of friends, but I had a few. And so I love finding them here and meeting them. Like I will stop a person on the street. Like if I hear him talking and I'm like, oh, hey, you're an American. Hey, what's up?
Yeah.
Literally just stop them. Like I followed a guy once through West End just to wait for him to get off the phone so I could like say hi. And he was like, okay.
Sometimes you just have to do that just to feel like you've got this little piece of home in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, like you're alone. I'm here with you. Hey, what's up? Yeah.
Yeah. And like when I remember when I was trying to make the decision whether to leave Vietnam to move to Australia, there was a big part of me that didn't want to, mainly because I felt like, all this work I've been doing, living in all these other countries and all this traveling, just to go live in some place that's just like where I came from.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this idea that I was going to this place that anyway, like being in Melbourne is a great city.
I know, yeah.
But there was a part of me that did feel a little bit of resentment. I'm just like, it's just like home, blah, 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 blah. But it really was not.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, of course there were the little differences. I think I was hoping for it to feel a little more uniquely Australian in some way. And I didn't necessarily have an image in my mind of what that would look like or what that might be. So I was really keen to find out.
Yeah.
But I felt like I was just back in the States and people talked funny until my first visit back home. I was like, oh yeah, this is nothing like Melbourne. This is nothing like the place that I, mainly grew up in.
Yeah. Where did you grow up again? It was back east, wasn't it?
Pennsylvania. Yeah. Well, I mean, I was in and out, back and forth between Pennsylvania and Peru, and moved a lot before we kind of settled in Pennsylvania. But it's a very different culture. So coming back to Australia, I mean, now it's home, but it made me really miss being in Australia when I was over there visiting.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of the differences that I found surprising were things like the workplace culture. Because like when I started working, I was at a language college before I started working at RMIT University. And it was a very different workplace culture. And I've worked in the UK as well, and even that was quite different. But I remember thinking that the UK was particularly like England. I was in Yorkshire when I was working there. England was so much more uniquely English than Australia is uniquely Australian, like for sure. For a variety of reasons. But yeah, the workplace culture I found very interesting. I remember an incident where I was when I got a full-time position at the university, I hadn't been allocated the full number of holiday
Mm,
days and sick days and things like that. And I didn't know until someone from HR came over to me, and they were very apologetic about it. They're like, "Oh, you're supposed to have this many days and blah 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 and all this." Like, I'm so sorry, blah blah. I'm like, I had no idea that I was entitled to more annual leave and more sick leave, because in the States, you have to work at a place for quite a long time
mm.
to accumulate paid time off
Yeah, yeah,
for more than like a week or two.
yeah, yeah. It normally starts with 2 to 3 weeks, depending on where and what industry you're in. And then it goes like 5 years, and you get that third or fourth week or whatever, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. And the
Hey,
other thing about like, yeah, and with paid time off in the US, they make it really hard for you to take it all at one time.
Oh yeah, you can't do that. I was like, what is
Yeah.
4 weeks off? You can't do that. No.
I remember working at a place once in the US, and there was a guy there who had been working there for years and years and years and years. I don't even remember exactly how many,
Mm,
but he was taking 4 weeks off,
yeah.
and it was like every other person, because I worked quite close to this guy, every other person was like, what are you gonna do for 4 weeks? Where are you gonna go? What? I'm thinking, well, I
Any
mean, now looking back, I'm just like, really?
oh,
Ugh,
that it
yeah.
is crazy to think, what are you gonna do with this much time off? I remember I took 6 weeks off once, and when I went home for 6 weeks, and my family was just like, "Are you gonna have a job when you go back?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm taking like they know I'm taking 6 weeks off. It's not a surprise. I'm taking 6 weeks off. It's been planned. Like it's been planned for over a year." They're like, "Oh my god, that's crazy." But
My, f- mm,
yeah, you can do that here, and it's not uncommon. I mean, people take half a year, They're like
yeah,
you can take your annual leave at half pay and
yeah,
stretch it out,
yeah,
and then add your long service leave to that and stretch that out, So you've got
yeah,
people taking like 26 weeks off all of a sudden, and
yeah.
it happens.
During my final year of work at RMIT, I had 10 weeks paid holiday.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I spent a lot of that in the US. Well, what was I doing? Yeah, I had like 2 months in the US. I had a couple of weeks just elsewhere in and around Brisbane. Um, and yeah, I was just like living life. But I
Hmm.
knew that I had a job to come back to after that.
Yeah.
And then when I like finally left that job because I was moving to Brisbane, I I had all this extra like sick leave and all this other stuff that they paid me out for,
Mhm.
that I was just like,
Because you still accumulate.
what? It felt like a severance package almost.
Yeah.
I was like, this does not happen in the US, not in any like normal working circumstance.
Yeah. I have no idea. Like, I mean, I only worked in America, oh, geez, 9 years. That's so weird. Yeah, I think I only worked in the US for about 9 years. So I worked longer here in Australia than I did over there.
Yeah.
Um, so it's very strange. It's very strange.
Yeah.
Things
There's
work.
this way of like in the US being just so beholden to an employer,
Mm. Yep.
partly because of the healthcare system.
Mm.
Well, I'd say mainly because of the healthcare system. And they just take ownership of you
But
in a way that I feel like people don't truly understand a
yeah,
lot of the time.
yeah, people feel that they're trapped
Yeah.
in, and I think and I guess that sort of like with the generation before us, that was the generation that would get hired by a company and they would stay with the company for their entire career, 40 years and stay with the company. I had people, we would have these celebrations for them, like 40 years of the company, 50 years of the company, 55 years of the company. I'm like, oh my God, you guys have been working for twice as long as I've been alive. Insane. And the very first company I worked for was Texaco. May they rest in peace. And I remember them telling us we were this graduate group that had come in. So this was back in 97, 98. And I remember them telling us that we would be the first generation of workers that would not work for a company throughout our entire career. Now, whether or not they were telling us that, layoffs were coming because the big organization reorg was happening or was about to happen, or, whether they were truly insightful, because that's basically like pretty much, I think I only know maybe a handful of those people that I started with that are still with the same company. Now, Texaco is no longer around, so it became Chevron, but there's only a handful of people that I know that are still with Chevron that started with me. I'm not one of them. But it's very rare. It is very rare. And I think even more rare for kids coming out of uni today because they're doing jobs that didn't exist when we graduated.
Yeah. And here there's also the issue of the increasing casualization of the workforce.
Yeah.
Which is very problematic for a lot of reasons. But the only, I guess, the main saving grace in my eyes for that whole thing is that there is more flexibility for an individual in terms of wanting to change careers or something like that, but it makes it really hard to plan ahead for things like getting a mortgage, or depending on the type of work you're doing, even like going on vacation. If you're planning ahead for a period where you're not sure whether or not you're going to be working somewhere, it's like,
I guess
like it's not great, but at least that whatever happens, you've got healthcare coverage.
Yeah, you will always have healthcare here. I personally have private healthcare, like spend the extra coin to get the better treatment.
Yeah, I've got private as well.
Yeah, so, but it's not something that an employer pays for you. Although I do believe that you can potentially negotiate that out of an employer. So that's another thing that I obviously working in America, you're taught the art of job negotiation. So, they tell you that when you go in for your interview, and if you know that you're a top candidate, you can start negotiating, healthcare and benefits and all of that sort of thing. And I did that when I came here. Because I didn't know any different. No one told me that that's not what you do. And I got them to pay for things, and I didn't no one said you don't have to negotiate benefits when you come to Australia, but I did it anyway. So, another thing that I find going back to the workforce, I felt that so there's this saying here in Australia that people work to live, they don't live to work. And they love to compare the US with that by saying, well, people in the US live to work and they don't work to live. And okay, yes, we can be workaholics in the US. We're not as bad as some countries. There are countries that work way more than we do. But I also feel that we have more drive in the US than they do here as well. I feel like I was a project manager and I worked as a consultant. So we always had deadlines. And in the US, we met those deadlines constantly. And if we didn't, oh my God, here, she'll be right. But the deadline is tonight at 5 o'clock, the number of deadlines that people would miss constantly, and there were no repercussions whatsoever. Even the client, well, miss that deadline, here's your next project. And I'm like, oh gosh, what? And
that was definitely,
I felt lazier here, if that makes sense. And I mean, yeah, sure, it's great to not work all the time, but I mean, I enjoyed what I did. And if I had a deadline, I would work to meet that deadline. And I was even reprimanded once for meeting a deadline. Like the way my boss put it was like, oh, well, if we hold out a little bit longer, we might be able to get them to agree to more and therefore get more money. And I'm like, why don't we just meet the deadline and then put something else forward? Like, I feel that that's being more genuine than trying to trick them into pay. I don't know. It was really very weird behavior.
Yeah. And I think it also is highly dependent on the kind of industry you're in, what the relationship to things like deadlines are, and like the work ethic question. And yeah, I mean, we could like go really deep into where these things come from, and maybe the sources of those differences can be very problematic. But one thing that I found very challenging to wrap my American brain around coming here and working in these sorts of environments was things like, it felt like so many things had to be decided by committee.
Yes.
Before anything could move forward. And like, I can appreciate that feeling of like wanting to like make people feel included, and like that whole idea of mateship, that whole idea of like, no, let's put our heads together and this and that. But it's like that's fine to a point. Like, I go into meetings sometimes and I'm like, okay, who is in charge? What is the plan? Let's give some feedback on this plan. Okay, now let's launch and course correct where we need to. Yeah. But it's like, it's all this, what do you think? 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 And it's like, yeah, gather the information that you need from everyone. Make sure that everyone has an opportunity to give important input. But it's like, once you've settled on a particular point, you can move on from that point.
Yeah.
I remember being in a meeting once where, well, it's kind of something that happened more than once, on more than one occasion, where it's like, okay, so we've decided it's probably better to not do this thing this way, and this is why. And then spent half the meeting talking about why we weren't going to do that thing anymore. And it's like, we've already established we're not doing that thing anymore.
Yeah.
Why can we move on, please?
Together a three dot points and move on. Like, you don't need all day to discuss it. Yep. Same sort of issues working in engineering. And, like, if I can, as a project manager, usually the word sort of stops with you, because you're the one who's making all the decisions. You're the one who's liaising with the client. You're the one who's running the job, and you have all the other engineers underneath you doing the work. And we came across a problem once with like a valve rating or something. And I got the company to send us information saying, no, you could actually use the valve in this pressure rating and it's fine. We've tested it for over 1,000 hours, blah, 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 whatever. And the client was happy with that, with putting that in, because otherwise going through and having to get a new valve of a higher rating would take an additional 12 weeks. And the client was like, well, just use this one. We know that it can handle this pressure. We'll work with it, and you guys just back order the other one and we'll move forward. My group decided against that and said, no, let us find a proper solution for this. It took them 8 weeks. They did not find a proper solution. They went back to what I had initially put forward. And I think I had a meltdown that day. Never melted down ever in a work environment, but I literally, like, I thought I was going to kill someone. I was just like, I need to step away, because you guys just wasted 8 weeks of not only my time, but of the client's time. And they're not the ones having to go back to the client every week and explain to them why this situation hasn't been closed out and moving. And I was like, what were you doing for 8 weeks? Like literally, oh no, we're waiting on more information. No, we're almost there. We're almost there. That was, and I kept saying, no, this is not what we need to do. But I think the director was like, no, Asabi, you need to listen to your team, let them. And yeah, I had some words for that director at the end of that as well. And like through tears, but I was yelling at him and just saying, you're undermining me. I do not accept this. Don't ever do it again. Okay, we're sorry. I mean, I got a lot of apologies for that. But it was like, I felt like my head had been sliced off, but just enough of it was still hanging on, like, what do you do? What do you do? And I was young-ish, like I was in my 30s, and there were a lot of people that didn't feel that I deserved to have the position that I had. And I rocked it. I mean, hey, I did a great
You probably looked a lot younger too.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, there were a lot of men that were under me going, why are you like this graduate? Like they called me a graduate. And I was like, I have over 10 years of experience. I'm not a graduate, but thanks for thinking,
Oh my gosh, the fight to be taken seriously.
Right? Oh,
yeah.
It's insane. And I don't care where you go. I feel that anywhere you go, as a woman especially, and when you look young, or even if you are young, people are just going to assume that you don't have the experience, you don't have knowledge, you don't know what you're talking about. And it happens. And I feel like I dealt with that pretty much my entire professional career. So for the 20 years that I worked, because I did always look young. At the beginning, I was young. So I made sure that I had people who were knowledgeable to help me, mentors and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to learn, and I wanted to be able to do a good job. And yeah, there were times when lots of things were thrust upon me, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I once had to manage a project designing a concrete tank, and which is normally left to a civil engineer. I'm a chemical engineer, but my boss was like, you're smart, you can do it. He was like, do you have any questions? Just ask me. Okay. And then I was like, well, wait a minute. If my boss believes I can do it, why don't I? So I'm yeah, all right. And yeah, I delivered this project on something I knew pretty much nothing about. But I had the people under me who knew. I knew that I had people I could go to and talk to. And my boss trusted me to get the job done. It doesn't kind of work that way here in Australia, or at least with the company that I was with, they question every little thing you wanted to do. And I'm like, well, I mean, if I don't know how to do it, I can figure it out. I mean, that's why I went to uni. I have a brain. I know how to use it. I can sort shit out. I can learn. But it was sometimes a struggle working with them, as they were like, well, you don't have a certificate to sample water. And I'm like, I just spent 9 years in the US being a water process engineer, sampling fucking wells day in and day out. I'm pretty sure I know how to take a water sample. Oh, but
you need certificates for everything here. And of course, like within like a specialized industry, like within engineering and things, like having particular certificates and stuff is like, like it's one of the things you got to do. But I do find it funny that compared to the US and compared to the US, even like within certain industries and even with very entry level positions, like you need to have a certificate.
Yeah.
If you want to work in a bar,
you
need to have a responsible serving of alcohol
or whatever it is.
RSL.
Whatever. Yeah, whatever that term is.
Yeah. If you want to work in a cafe, a lot of times like you need to take a barista course. I'm not saying this is necessarily true in every single case. I don't know all the details.
Now that I wouldn't necessarily say no to, because I've heard that there are some people that just don't know how to fucking make coffee.
But you know what? I think it's also one of the reasons coffee is so much better here than in the US. Oh my gosh.
I'm not a coffee drinker, so But I'm only just, regurgitating what I've heard.
Well, I think there's a lot of coffee snobbery here
Yeah,
because the coffee is so good. Like, because people know what good coffee is supposed to taste like.
I take your word for it. Like all coffee stinks to me. I can't, like espresso especially, I can't stand the smell of it. And in most cases, it actually makes me nauseous. So I think I might be allergic. Foul. And one of the like most disgusting things to me, maybe not disgusting, that might be harsh, but when my boss would always say, let's go get a coffee. And I'm like, why? I don't want to go get a coffee. If you want to talk to me, just fucking talk to me. I don't want to go and sit in a cafe where it stinks like coffee. I can't stand the smell of coffee. So
Wow, that bad.
yeah, I'm pretty passionate about it.
How are we friends? I love coffee. I love the smell of coffee. I mean, I don't drink it black. Like I'm not a psychopath, but like I like coffee.
Might as well just sip whiskey if you're gonna do that, which tastes so much better. To me, it's all. But I like teas, and
Oh,
chai
yeah.
lattes. Like I like the frothed
Okay.
milk that they put in chai, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's pretty lovely. Add a little bit of honey to that. That's good.
So you've never had a dirty chai then?
Ew, you know what? No, like I saw it once on a menu because I was like during the summer this year, everybody drinks iced coffee. And I was like, can you do an iced chai? And on the menu, it was like, oh, yeah, well, we do an iced dirty chai. And I was like, well, what makes it dirty? And they're like, oh, there's a shot of espresso. I was like, okay, no, I don't want that. I just want an iced chai. Like, don't put that nasty
I want
coffee.
a clean chai.
No. And so they were like, people were surprised, like, but okay. And so then they brought me an iced chai. And I'm like, iced chais, if you've never had one, you need to get one. If you love chai lattes, get an iced chai. It will change your life. It's so good. So refreshing. Fresh.
Those people at the cafe are probably still like, I cannot believe that woman didn't want a dirty chai.
Like, how dare you order something and change it off the menu? Like, well,
I don't know why I was talking like the Queen of freaking England just then.
Oh,
It's funny. Like you mentioned the accent thing before, and I find it so strange that like I'm pretty decent at faking various types of accents. And like different British accents, different English accents from different regions of England. Like I can at least rattle off a few sentences and be fairly convincing, but for some reason, I just cannot seem to do a decent Australian accent.
Hard.
Which is so ironic because it's like I've been living here for 12 years and it's like sometimes I'll be reading storybooks to my daughter. We'll be reading Bluey or something. And I try to do like the characters' voices. And my husband will just be like sitting in a corner just snickering at how ridiculous I sound. And I'm like, I don't understand it. Why can't I nail this accent?
It's, I honestly believe that I think we can. I think there's something in our brain that forces us to choose not to. Because I know that there are words that I say sometimes that come out very Aussie and people call me out on it, like I said before, but I don't know. As soon as I actually took a class, I took an accent class with a woman to teach me to do an Aussie accent. And she was like, everything that she would tell me to do, she was like, oh my God, that's so much better than I expected it to be. There's just this assumption that we can't do it. Meryl Streep, thank you. And no one, like, I've heard a number of actors try and they sound horrible. And it's mainly because they don't live here and I don't know what they're watching to try and get an Aussie accent, but you need to go bush. Like you got to get out to the little country towns. You got to listen to those guys. It's annoying, but I mean, you got to do it. You got to listen to how they talk, sit, have a cup of tea, have a coffee, whatever. And then you need to put your own spin on it. And it's not going to sound the same, and there are lots of foreign born people and immigrants here who have melded their accent with the Australian accent. And I think that's kind of what the American Aussie accent is going to sound like.
Yeah.
A little bit of a mix. of
Yeah.
American and Australian.
Yeah.
And mate, once you get it down,
Australian.
that's what it sound like. And you just gotta be on it, and you gotta push fight, and you gotta be happy with it. And that's what I gotta do. That's what you gotta do. That's how it's gotta be.
It's funny. It's like there are some words and like small expressions that sometimes do come out of my mouth in a very Aussie sort of way that I don't take notice of until I'm visiting the States and someone else giggles at me for it.
Yeah.
But like, even when I listen to my daughter speak, she's 4.5, and like I couldn't hear her accent, or I didn't notice her accent at all until we went to the US. Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, child, you sound so Australian. And it was just the cutest thing. But like, I remember going to the shopping mall. She's running around, she's in this new environment, and like I'd be trying to like keep her in line or whatever, and every now and then she'd say like, "Mommy, you can't." And I just have to like assure any people listening, I'm like, she's Australian. She's not vulgar. Yes, it's like she's like, no, I am a good parent. Like, it's okay. Everything's fine.
Does she say mummy or mommy? How does she say
it? Usually mummy.
Mummy?
Well, it's almost like this in-betweenness.
Yeah.
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 Well, yeah, she says it's definitely more mummy than mommy.
Mommy, yeah. Mom. Yeah.
Mama.
I was talking with my dad the other day, and he says, let me see if I can get it right. He says Aussie instead of, we say Aussie, and he says Aussie. Yeah. and I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do that. It's funny.
Now, when you go home, because I've noticed that this has happened to me a few times, I will automatically slip into this weird Aussie accent, and it almost sounds perfect to my ears. And I don't quite understand how it happens. It's just like, because I don't do it. At least I don't think I do it here. Maybe I do. I don't know. I flip into this weird, and people are like, oh my God, where are you from? And I'm like, I'm from here. And they're like, no, you're not. And I'm like, yeah, I am from here. I was born here. And then I'm like, oh my God, I sound like an Aussie. Oh my God, what am I doing? Oh no. And it's the weirdest thing. Does that happen to you?
I do find myself saying g'day.
Yeah.
When I go home, which I think is so strange because I don't say that here.
Right? Yeah. No.
But I say howdy here all the time. And I don't say that when I'm in the US.
I never.
It's like my brain just goes.
Yeah. Flips upside down.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I've only once submitted an audition in an Australian accent, and the feedback that I got, which normally you never get feedback, but my agent was like, oh yeah, no, you got some feedback. I thought you did really well. I didn't get the role, but they decided to like give me feedback, and I used an Aussie accent, and my agent was quite impressed with it as well. It's actually not. It's like I was worried when you said you wanted to do it, but it was the reason I did it was because of the language that the script was written in. It would not have sounded authentic coming out of an American accent, like with the idioms that they used. So it just didn't work.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, I can do it in an Aussie accent, and we'll see how we go. And yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Let me ask you a very controversial question.
Oh, yes. Controversial.
Question. How many syllables are in the word no?
Well, technically there's only one, but if you're saying it like an Australian and you say no, there's two.
I think you could get almost to 5 if you're being really dramatic.
No, it's always, no, that's not. No.
You haven't pissed off enough Australians, clearly, because
well,
seriously,
I took a look and they stopped saying no halfway through, so maybe that's why.
Okay, so maybe like 3 or 4 syllables. No.
Oh, but that's not. necessarily a syllable. I think those are inflections.
Hey, I have a master's degree in applied linguistics, okay? I've been training for so long for this conversation to be able to say this.
To you. Let me non-educated explain it to you. I know nothing about linguistics.
Are you yanksplaining to me right now?
Yeah. Maybe there's a part of my brain that like cuts it off it too as well.
No.
Listen to the rest of it.
No.
But yeah.
Obviously, we're not following the strictest definition of what a syllable is, but for our purposes, I think, yeah, it's a good mood indicator, I think.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
And however Aussies say yes is always just the one. It's like,
yeah,
yep,
oh yeah,
yeah, nah, mate, nah. That's like my favorite aspect of Australian.
That's so good. The yeah, nah. I did that once back home.
Yeah, nah, mate.
So it's like, wait, what?
It's like, wait, do you mean yes or no? Like, do you want to crash the mall today or not? Yeah, nah, mate. Like, wait, but what does that mean? Like, it means I don't want to crash the mall today.
It's ultimately, it's
but
like,
you said yes, then you said no. It's like, no, I didn't.
It's the ultimate, it's whatever is last. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I'm listening, but no, I don't care.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, nah. I love it. Yeah. It's such a weird thing. That and the upward inflection at the end of sentences that are supposed to be statements.
What? You mean like, it's like how everything sounds like it's a question?
Right?
Yeah.
No, exactly. I mean, I think that's what I'm talking about. Is that right? I don't know.
Yeah. It's funny, like I find it quite cute most of the time. Like it kind of lends this level of friendliness almost, but that's why I find it a little jarring in professional capacities. Yes. When someone's delivering a presentation and they're like, this is really important. Like you really have to pay attention to this. And, our company has lost $3 trillion in the last quarter. It's like,
I brought someone about this and I asked them why. And the reason this particular person gave me was that they didn't want to come off as being too forward. Like, I just did it.
You just did it.
Off as being too forward? Maybe? I don't know. And I was like, wait, what? And it's because it's so definitive when you speak in that downward inflection, like that's how it is. And they find that that's a little aggressive. And that's why people tend to talk with that upward inflection.
Yep.
They don't want to sound so aggressive to people. And I'm like, fuck it, sound aggressive.
Yeah, exactly.
Mean what you say, state what you're supposed to be saying.
Yeah. There is that risk that a lot of people don't, or that people generally speaking here are less comfortable to take of offending someone by presenting yourself as someone who is staunch, as someone who is very self-assured. It's like there's this fine line between self-assuredness between self-confidence and arrogance.
Yes, I agree.
Whereas we as Americans, we're like twerking all over that line.
You're like, I know what's right.
Yeah, it's like, I may be right, I may be wrong, but who knows? One way to find out. Let's just go with it. Hey.
I remember once when I was studying, so I studied acting here in good old Brisbane, and I had come in one day to, I don't know, hand in some paperwork or something, or maybe some homework. And there was a student there he was a day student. So I studied at night. And so this was a day student and he hadn't met me before. He hadn't seen me before. And so he was really excited that I was in. And even though we told him that I was a night student, he, for whatever reason, still thought that I was new. So he wanted to give me a tour. And I think he also wanted to practice his American accent on me. But before, when I was first being introduced to him, he said, "Oh, is that an American accent? And I said, oh no, look, I went to school down in Logan, and for a few years there was this initiative where they wanted to teach all of the students to have American accents, and I was just part of that initiative. Oh, really? And that's why they call us Seppos. Because they it was apparently so convincing, poor kid. He really believed me. And
what's a Seppo?
oh, have you not heard the term Seppo?
No.
Let me educate you. So Seppo, so you know in Australia they have this rhyming slang, right? Which comes from Cockney, UK back in the day when all prisoners came over or whatever. And so they have these little rhyming, I guess, idioms that they use to create little nicknames for things. So a Seppo is the
nickname. Oh, septic tank.
Yeah, septic tank, an American.
Yeah.
So a Yank, septic tank, right? And the reason they say that is because we are full of shit. Talk a big game, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And we lie and we're full of shit. So Yank, septic tank, Seppo.
Okay. So yeah, like septic tank I'm familiar with. Seppo I hadn't heard.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense because Aussies shorten everything.
You, right? They shorten everything and they have nicknames for everyone and everything. And I was once telling someone, I was like, well, technically I'm from the South, so I'm not really a Yank. And that sort of I watched a head explode. Like, Yankees are from the North, motherfucker. I'm a Southerner, not a
I'm a Yankee.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was born in Yankee territory. So.
That's it. I was born in Texas, but I didn't grow up there.
What? I was born in Ohio.
We should have high-fived when we crossed that midpoint.
Yes, there were so many things that I expected Australia to be that it didn't turn out to be. But in saying that, I came to a country where I literally knew no one. I wasn't planning to stay longer than 2 years. By the time I had reached November, so I arrived in January, and by the time I'd reached November, I had this massive group of friends. I'd met people, I had friends from work, friends from outside of work, just because I'm that crazy bitch that's I don't know what to do this weekend. I'm just going to go do something. And you meet people and, and I'm approachable. So it was easy for me to make friends. And by the time, I remember the end of that first year, I had a Thanksgiving potluck. And in my little apartment, I guess it wasn't that little, but I had 40 people come and bring dishes that either were symbolic to their culture or a favorite dish that they liked. I had this friend who is still a very good friend of mine today, who is from Georgia, from the US, from outside of Atlanta. And she was a former minister. And so, she said some words before we ate and kind of gave a little history of Thanksgiving and why it's important to us, because a lot of people don't know. They just think, oh, it's an American holiday, and they don't really understand the significance behind it, and it was just to look at where I started, arriving in this town, not knowing anyone, not knowing my way around, to 11 months later, having this massive group of friends and this party and celebration of not only my culture, but everyone else's. It sort of, as much shit talk as we might do about Australia, it really said to me that, how great the country is, how much greatness there is and friendship there is and diversity and togetherness that you can find if you look for it.
If I knew then what I know now, when I was trying to decide whether or not to come here or stay in Vietnam, it would have been a no-brainer. It would have been yes, going to Australia, gonna get residency, gonna get citizenship. And like you mentioned Thanksgiving, and I like the way that it has really turned into something very different for people, even though there are very problematic roots. But That's a different conversation. Like little American idiosyncrasies and things, like I found people here tend to really appreciate kind of getting in on those little celebrations and things. And that's one thing I really like about being here. And yeah, I mean, I'm an activist, I'm constantly out telling Australia what it needs to do better. Especially in terms of treatment of Indigenous peoples and refugees and various oppressed people. But that said, overall, I am still very grateful to be in a place where I can have that sort of a voice and where I can have the time in my day to engage in those kinds of activities, and where I can have like the work-life balance to be able to go out onto the streets and protest, and to be able to connect with friends. People, I think, even on that friendship level, have more time for each other here.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful to be a citizen, partly because, they can't get rid of me unless I really tick someone off.
Yeah, exactly. And even then, it's still really difficult. So yeah, exactly. And especially with everything that's happened in the pandemic, like we've fared so much better than the people in our any
hometowns.
other country other than New Zealand. Yeah. Like I think we've probably done the best. New Zealand, Australia has probably done the best in the world, I would say.
Yeah. But there are definitely a lot of topics to cover within all of this. So yeah, in the future, when we have these conversations, I want to talk about dating as an African American woman in Australia. I want to talk a bit more about workplace culture. I want to talk about even like healthcare. I want to talk about just there's so many things I want to talk about.
There's so many things to cover.
So many things. Anyway, thank you so much for making time to have this conversation with me. It's always good to talk to you.
Yes, it definitely is. We should do this in person sometime. Like we could go to a cafe. But it's terrible smelling coffee. I'll have my iced chai. You can have whatever coffee.
I'll have a dirty chai.
Yeah, sure. Like I don't know, what do they call them? Flat whites? I don't even know what that means. Like I was like, why is it flat in a white person? What? No.
Let's talk about white lady funerals sometime. Okay. Anyway,
whole thing on
my computer is legit about to die. It's screaming at me.
All right. Thank you so much. It was lovely talking to you.
Thank you. Bye, baby.
Bye.
Thank you for watching. And if you found this video helpful, make sure to give it a big thumbs up and share it with someone else who can benefit from it. Subscribe to my channel and hit the notifications bell so you know exactly when I've uploaded a new video. You can also book a free life coaching session with me through my website, leslievcoaching.com, and we can work together online or right here in my studio. Follow me on my socials to keep up with what I'm doing, and please get in touch with any questions, comments, or video ideas you may have. I'm Leslie V, and I'll see you in the next video.